Okay. I'm quite keen on the idea of starting reasonably on time. So I think we will get started with a welcome. So really good evening to you all. And my name is Stephen Carthew, and I'll be emceeing the evening and introducing the speakers and trying to keep some semblance of order during question time. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, both past and present, and pray that we all continually seek reconciliation with our Kaurna brothers and sisters, taking any opportunity we can to welcome them to community events, as they so warmly welcomed us when they buried their old people's bones in the Chubiki Springs, Kingston Park Coastal Reserve. It was a magic morning for those of us lucky enough to have been there. Tonight, I also want to mention the very real feelings we all must have for associates, friends and family members in Melbourne who are having a hard time. I have a son there and Auntie Joan, the last of the old clan, at 94. She lives by herself in a retirement village. Thankfully, she retains her sense of humour. We talked earlier today and she said, "I'm watching old English comedies like Mrs. Bouquet, Mrs. Bucket, to keep from becoming morbid." Anyway, so to this evening. First, we need to have a little talk about housekeeping. Please make sure that you are registered. If you are not, could you please quietly go up and do that, as it's a COVID state government requirement. As there are some electromagnetic sensitive people in the audience, would you please make sure your mobile phones are configured to flight mode with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off. If that's too hard, just turn it off altogether. If you have the COVID Safe app, it will retain where you are, and when you turn it on again, it will resume its tracing. I checked with the COVID Safe advisors this morning, and they are happy about this and our COVID Safe plan. So to comply with COVID distancing guidelines of clumping, there will not be a comfort break tonight. So please, whenever you need to, make your way quietly to the back of the hall, where you will see the restroom on the left, one of the few North American terms that I like and have adopted. I need to make two more requests of you. No hugging. It could get me a $5,000 fine. I am the legal COVID host of the evening. I'm not sure that sounds very good. Anyway, and most seriously, I would ask that we be kind to each other and respectful of alternative viewpoints, even when we strongly oppose them. This issue of 5G can be divisive if we let it. Let us resist the urge to overstate or talk over each other or get angry at each other. This evening is designed to share information from an alternative position to the mainstream narrative. It is not an evening for debating. That evening may come at some point, but this is not that evening. The big wireless telcos are advertising the wonders of 5G, while the government is spending $9 million convincing us that it's safe at taxpayers' expense. We are sharing information which they are not. It is our freedom to do that, and your freedom to listen to what shall be said. And there will be a question time after each speaker, a limit of 2 most urgent questions. Then after all speakers have had their say, there will be a longer question time to the panel of speakers. Now to the length of the evening. It will be that of a reasonably long movie. Not as long as Gandhi, which ran for 3 hours and 10 minutes, but about the same time as Erin Brockovich, who ran for 2 hours and 11 minutes. And it's sort of the same sort of theme, really, isn't it? So, actually it was 2 hours and 12 minutes, sorry, without the titles. So settle in. By the end of next week, the website mentioned on the one pager sitting on your on your seats should be up. The webmaster unfortunately became ill yesterday and has not been able to complete it for tonight or for the weekend. You will receive a notification when it's up, after which you can subscribe or unsubscribe. Donations. If you feel after the evening that you've had good value from tonight, you can make yourself feel really good about yourself by making a donation to help defray the out-of-pocket expenses which we've incurred. We are not so well organised as to be able to accept donations by card, but there may come a time when we are. Apologies. I have apologies from Boothby's Member of Parliament, Nicole Flint, from the State Member for Black and Minister for the Environment, David Spears, Holdfast Bay Council Mayor Amanda Wilson, and Marion Council Mayor Chris Hanna, and a number of councillors. We do have some councillors with us tonight, and we thank them for coming out on a cold Friday evening, as we thank all of you who have come. Now, just a little word about the tower, which is mentioned, as you'll see on the handout there, and was written in the flyer. Mayor Hanna's last letter to our group clarifies the situation in regard to the 4G LTE tower proposed in the linear reserve, diagonally opposite the hall. His letter will be on the new 5G Pause to Consider website, and it says, in essence, it explains that the proposed installation has not been completed and that Optus will inform Council before it installs any emitter. Residents are able to receive notifications of this development and take part in community consultation by registering on the Radio Frequency National Site Archive, RFNSA. This industry has long and terrible acronyms. Now, for the evening, Tim is our first guest speaker and keynote speaker. Tim Sawyer. In 2013, Tim was awarded the title Apple Distinguished Educator, which involved the use of technology in education and overseas consultancy work for Apple. In 2014, Tim was approached by the Australian firm Geobiologist to be their South Australian consultant in EMF assessments, that's electromagnetic frequency assessments for homes and businesses. Being in a unique position to have a foot in both camps, Tim understands the importance of low EMF environments and the ability to still use technology safely. For the last 4 years, Tim and his wife Carthew have built a healthy home on 38 acres of land in the Adelaide Hills. Their home is exceptionally low in all EMFs, including no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but still has the modern conveniences of fast internet access. Tim and Carthew are looking forward to their next project, which includes building a chook house and establishing beehives. The floor is yours, Tim.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I start, I just want to say a few words. When I was approached to give this talk, the first thing I thought when they mentioned 5G, that this is a difficult topic. It's a difficult topic for a number of reasons. There's a whole lot of different parts to it, but it's also a very new topic as well. So some of the information I've got, there's some little gaps in it because it's so new. We'll find out more as it's rolled out. Okay, that's good. Okay, so to me, 5G is like a Trojan horse. There's a lot of positive things about it. There's also a lot of negative things. So I'll go through some of those. So,
Can't hear you.
Still can't hear me?
You have to get really close.
Okay. Have to eat it. Okay. I just need to see the screen as well, so I just move it. Okay. So first of all, is one of the good things is higher speed, very, very fast speed. It also has the ability to connect to what we call the Internet of Things, and there's a whole range of those things being rolled out as well. I also mentioned a little bit about, self-driving cars and the issues with those as well. And 5G satellite is another area of 5G. Then you come around to some of the negative things about beamforming, privacy issues. You're going to basically have both 4G and 5G together, so the actual level of exposure in the environment is going to increase when 5G is released. And also there'll be antennas. The information varies. Some say every third or fifth house. Other people say every 100 metres or 200 metres. We won't really know until they actually start appearing in the streets. But they're going to be close anyway. And lastly, I'll be talking about the health effects. There's quite a lot of information now about the possible health effects of 5G. There's already a lot of information out there. Some of you may know about the health effects of 4G. Well, 5G is just things going to make it worse. So I'll speak about that as well. Okay, what is 5G? So if you see the screen, you've got 2G, 3G, 4G, then 5G. The thing to note about this is that 5G, you've got about, it's around between 2 and 2.5 for 2G, 3G and 4G. So there hasn't been much change over that range over the years. But when you jump to 5G, you're getting up to sort of 95 gigahertz. It's a huge jump. It's they call it millimetre wavelengths. They can be anywhere between 1 and 10 millimetres apart. So that's a huge difference. And the effects on health are also a concern, particularly if it's pulsating. There's a high pulsation rate with 5G as well. Coming down to the next graphic there, they've got this spectrum there. They're saying, there's 5G starts here, which looks like an overlap with 4G. So they call that sub 6 gigahertz. So there's going to be two bands, sub 6 gigahertz, and the next band is what we call millimetre wavelength, which is around 20 gigahertz and plus. So it's a little bit confusing. There's actually two bands. They're both calling them 5G, but one of them is very close to 4G. So I imagine we're going to see more of the sub 6 gigahertz being rolled out first, and probably later next year we'll start seeing 5G millimetre or beam forming. Down the bottom here, there's the various bands pointed out, so my pointer's not too bright. You can see the green one there. So that's around the 60 gigahertz, and that one is unlicensed. What that means is that there's no cost to use that band. So a lot of companies are jumping on that particular millimetre frequency because there's no cost to them. One particular company is rolling out 5G cells is Facebook. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why is Facebook now becoming a telecommunication provider? The graphic at the very end there shows that there'll still be the towers around, and you'll have 5G down the base there. Then, because it hasn't got as much penetration power, the next band would be the sub 6 gigahertz, and then finally you have 4G. So 4G will still exist. Probably in rural areas you'll still see 3G as well. So you're going to have like 3G, 4G, 5G occurring all at once. And around the home, small cells, they're saying be 5G millimetre wave, but it also would just be 5G because 5G millimetre wave does not have a lot of penetration. So they'll still need to have 5G in the sub 6 gigahertz band as well. So they're the two bands they're showing on the screen side by side. And with the 5 millimetre band, it's basically received on demand. So there'll be a 5G phone, and when the person makes the call and they're outside, the beam will come to them. So it will come straight to their phone. The beam will be targeted towards their phone. So you're getting very high data rates. Therefore, it will not be sweeping the neighbourhood with a strong focused beam. So it comes on, then it goes off. Right. But you will still have the sub-6, or 4G or low to mid-band 5G, that will always be on bathing the neighbourhood with RF energy. So the graph up there shows millimetre wavelength going to, to a car, it's another area, or to a person, and 5G L, or, under 6 gigahertz, and 4G will be still bathing the area as well. So you've got this layering effect occurring in the neighbourhood. So here is an image of beam forming. You can see the person's making a phone call. You can see it's going to those 2 cars, and it's very targeted. Once that conversation is finished, the beam will stop. The beam here would actually follow the car as it goes along. The problem with 5G phones is that 5G millimetre wavelength gets absorbed, by a number of things. It gets absorbed by air, by rain, by trees, and I'll show you some slides in a minute. But it's also absorbed with your hand. So the new phones that come out now, they will have multiple antennas around the phone. So instead of just having one antenna, which for the iPhone is normally down the bottom, they'll have antennas at the top, bottom and sides as well. Because they want to try and catch that signal, where your hand is not. So they're going to increase the number of antennas. So where is 5G? You can go to a website, nperf.com, and that will then show you where it is. The purple is 5G, and you can see here, this is actually Frome Road and Victoria Drive here. So the photo I took of 5G is Telstra's 5G, and it was normally a rectangular type box. If you see, I can see down here, 4G, they're sort of cylindrical, so don't confuse the two. It has to be a rectangular box because it's a phased array, little elements in there to create the beam sweeping for 5G millimetre. I also looked around this area, you may recognise it from the map, and you can see that there's some purple around, there's no purple 5G around this area at the moment. This is a video capture on YouTube. I think it's in Chicago in America. So this person here is testing a new Samsung 5G phone. So you can see him down here where the arrow is, and up there you can see the actual 5G antenna. So he's getting speeds of 1,522 megabits per second, which is quite fast. Our home internet is around 80 megabits per second, and it's still pretty good, 80 megabits per second. So that's very fast. Then when he goes around the corner, it drops off rapidly to 251, and that's just around the corner here of this building. So the comment that he made when he first saw it, he was amazed at the speed, but then he said that at that rate he's going to chew through his data in about a week. So a month's worth of data is now gone in a week. So therefore the main aim is to get money off you. So you'll be paying more money for your data allowance. And if you have a driverless car that's also connected to 5G, you'll be paying for data that the car uses as well. Does that make sense? So this is an expensive rollout. They want a big payback. And so that we are the ones, if you own the phones, will be paying back that way. And also companies like Apple and all the others, they're very much for it because everyone would have to go out and get a new phone. Your phone may be only a year old, but it hasn't got a 5G chip in it, and so we go out and have to buy a new phone, or they'll encourage us to. You don't have to, I wouldn't personally. And then when 6G rolls out, then you'll need to buy a 6G phone. So they continually to, you continue to be forking out money with this new 5G, by the way, stands for 5th generation. So millimetre wave in action, so is affected by buildings. They say it can penetrate glass, but not brick or metal. It's affected by rain and air. It actually interacts with the oxygen molecule. It's also attenuated by trees and plants. So as you move around, there'll be buildings, in the city, one cell will be targeting you, then you'll jump to another one, then another one as you move around. They basically will follow you. Here is Facebook's Teragraph. So you can see it's sort of a square rectangle box. There's the phased array inside, or the little chips that allow the focusing of the beam. So it's 5mm wave that Facebook is using in the 60 gigahertz range, which is no license, no cost to them. They will be at street level, and they'll be about 150 metres apart. And as I said before, it's in the unlicensed spectrum. There's no cost to Facebook. And it's been rolled out in USA, UK, EU and Asia. I've been keeping an eye out for Australia. I haven't seen it as yet. I'm hoping it won't come here, particularly with those specs. The Internet of Things. Now this is, another selling point for various companies. So everyone buys these devices which can connect to the internet. Sort of makes life more convenient. So you've got a lot of wireless devices out there now, outdoor cameras, Bluetooth headphones, cordless phones. You can have lights that have got an antenna inside of them. So from your phone, you can dim the light, you can change the light colour. If you get a Facebook status update, the light flashes blue. If there is a fire in the house, then the lights will flash red. So you get all these sort of marvellous little things to keep you informed. And you've got Google Home and smartwatches. But also what's coming out is some other smart devices. They all seem to have the word smart in front of them. So a smart fridge. And a smart fridge actually has cameras inside of it. So you can go to the shopping centre and look inside your fridge. You may see your kid's hand appear and take something. And that way you can say, okay, we're running out of milk, so I'll buy some milk. And I need some more, meat. And the next one is a smart kettle, so it tells you when it's boiled. So that's really convenient. And then the smart fridge, when your washing is finished, or it tells you time. There's 1 minute and 9 seconds left. So it gives you, down to that sort of detail. We live in a 2-storey house, and when our washing machine finishes, it makes a noise, and we can hear it right throughout the house. What I'm trying to say is you don't really need some of these devices. They're designed to just pull more money out of you, really. And you become embedded in this EMF smog. It's inside your house. I've had clients where they've been concerned about a mobile phone tower, but when I've gone into the house, they've had multiple routers, Wi-Fi routers, and the level inside the house was higher than the level from the actual tower outside. So we really got to look at what's around in our environment, and do we really need some of those devices? Okay, I'll go to self-driving vehicles now. A lot of companies are working on different types of vehicles that are going to be self-driving or autopilot, but there's still a bit of a confusion about the standard. Some companies are doing 5G, others are doing Wi-Fi. We'll see which standard is going to win. You've also got other companies like Apple and Uber who are now building cars or designing cars. And Johnny Ives once insisted on the Apple car being without a steering wheel. And there was a lot of concern about that with an Apple, because people do want to have some sort of control. They don't want to be sitting in a box and watching where it's going with no control. So the question is raised, what happens if the car has an accident? Is the person that's in the car who's not the driver, in other words, he's a passenger, are they liable, or is it the company that built the car liable? Or is the network, if the network goes down? So who's liable there? They can be hacked, like a lot of technology can be hacked. There's safety issues and high running costs, like the use of data. So it's a short little video clip, there's no audio. This is a Tesla Model 3 just here. This is a lorry that's flipped on its side, and this is the driver of the lorry, okay? So you got those three objects in your mind. So he tried to warn them, and in the end, it didn't stop. So be interested to know what comes out of that type of situation, who becomes liable. I just want to mention about 5G satellites. There's been a lot of talk about that. They're saying they're going to, release over the next 10 years or less, 12,000. They won't be 5G millimetre wavelength. They'll be 5G, so that penetration power. But there are a number of people raising concerns about them, not just citizens, but the National Atmospheric Administration have issued a warning that 5G satellites will interfere with weather satellites and weather prediction. So they're just concerned about all this EMF up there, or space junk, that's going to get in the way of things like weather prediction. Also, the aviation industry is concerned about aviation navigation with all these satellites up there as well. So there's like a national appeal that's going on to try and stop any more of 5G satellites going into outer space. But there's also, I just want to mention this, there's a political party that's been formed in the process being formed in Australia called No 5G Inc. And it's run by a barrister has got an amazing sort of list of objectives. And this is number 24 of that list, and promoting and regulating and monitoring around telecommunications satellites that fly over Australian airspace. And they want to bring back the space activities appeal, where there is compensation in far as insurance, which is up to $750 million per satellite. So they basically want to scare them into thinking, okay, do you really want to put this into space, coming over Australian soil where we may see you for this large amounts of money, trying to deter them. I'll just mention that all the various links I've got in my presentation will be available on the SCENE website. So the SCENE website, is that available at the... Yep, there's a handout, is there? I've got a flyer, there's a flyer. So, next week all these various links that I'm talking about will be on the SCENE website. I just want to talk about a couple of cases, as I've been, assessing houses now for over 6 years, and I've noticed that the hypersensitivity, or EHS, is increasing. Some of the other speakers tonight will be talking about it as well, their own personal cases. But in this situation, this was a 32-year-old male whose job was to actually repair towers. So normally what they're supposed to do is turn off the transmitters before they go up there in the crane. But because a lot of people complain they no longer can get reception, the foreman says, yeah, I'll turn it off, because the switch is down, but on ground level, and then he turns it back on. So they're basically working up there with the transmitter active. And so over a number of years of that, he started becoming hypersensitive. Became hypersensitive to such a point that he created himself a Faraday cage. So this is made out of copper mesh, and the little door is little magnets which he clicks on once he's inside there. And that was the only way that he could get a decent night's sleep, because he was so hypersensitive. So that's the first case. The second case, this is a 56-year-old housewife. She also was hypersensitive. She was actually very hypersensitive, because they're interested in buying a house. And quite often I get asked to do a pre-purchase inspection of a house as far as EMF. And I've been up to go to 5 different houses before someone is happy with the house that they want to buy. So she went with me on the first open inspection, and we were walking around this house together, and I had my meters with me. And she said, I can feel Wi-Fi now from that cupboard there. There was a wardrobe in a bedroom. I opened the wardrobe and there was a router that was on. So she could detect it very easily. So she was resort to actually sleeping in a tent in a bedroom that's covered with foil. So they find relief from this foil, because And she had her feet sometimes sticking out, and sometimes she'd fit on her feet, so just tuck her feet in at night. I also have a lot of clients who actually sleep in their car by the beach. So why is the beach so good? Because there's normally no towers at sea. So they're decreasing their exposure by 50% basically. So they spend their life each night sleeping in cars. It's not uncommon. And, you know, when I say to these people that I've seen more and more like you, they feel happy about that because they think they're abnormal. I said, you're not abnormal. This is going to increase. Like I've got the picture of a little canary. These people are the canaries in the mine, basically. There's a very good site, and I'll put this link on the scene website. Electro-sensitivity Society has a lot of resources there for people who are hypersensitive. And also objective number 15 down the bottom there, establishing non-ionising electromagnetic radiation free zones or white zones. So these are free of actually EMFs, so be a sanctuary for both humans, flora and fauna, but also the animals and the trees are also being affected by this as well. And I'll briefly mention that at the end. I just want to talk now about EMF Health Effects. And this is the limits that Australia, UK and US have set. It's very high, so 1,000 microwatts per centimetre squared. And that comes from World War II radar days, when radar's very high power and the radar operators were getting sick. So, okay, when that reaches like thermal effect, then that's the limit. Anything below that, they're saying there's no issue. We do know there is issue. There's a lot of research out there saying there's biological effects. So you can see that countries down here, there's a whole range there, they've got them around 10 or 100. So a lot of the world, you know, you can see about 40% of the world has got very low output of their towers, yet they still can have a phone conversation. They can still download YouTube videos. The power that these towers are putting out around us is very high in Australia, UK and US. So we don't need any more towers. The towers we've got now is enough. We just need to change this limit. And how do you measure that limit? Well, you may have seen the four corners on 5G, and you saw this device here. This is basically measuring the temperature of that fluid which mimics our tissue from a phone that's underneath. And as it says here, it's called SARS, which is Specific Absorption Rate Testing. So SARS actually refers to thermal effect, while the vast majority of the recorded biological effects from man-made non-ionising environment radiation are not thermal. So most of the health effects are biological, not thermal. Thus, SARS should not be used as a primary dosimetric quantity. We should get away from that thermal effect. Everyone should be focusing on the biological effect and create rules and regulations around that. This document here is going to be, the link's going to be on the scene website. I urge everyone in this room to download this document. It's free. What you'll find in that is it's 2020, very up-to-date information. There is, like Chapter 3, this person's got a degree in physics with honours. He's also got a PhD in biochemistry and genetics. Chapter 3 is strong evidence about cumulative and irreversible EMF effects. EMF including Wi-Fi, particularly damaging to children, that's Chapter 4. Chapter 1 talks about the extremely well-documented effects of non-thermal EMF exposure, otherwise biological effects. And you can see in brackets a number, that's the number of independent research papers that agree with that finding. So the first one is 21 different scientists or papers have also come to that same conclusion. Breaks DNA, both single and double strands. Lowers male and female fertility. There's been a big drop for male. almost down to 50%. Neuropsychiatric effects, 25 journal articles support that. Cell death, free radical damage, endocrine or hormonal effects, 12 papers there. Cancer causation, 35. And increased interstellar calcium, so the calcium between the cells. So that's all saying that's extremely well documented effects. Chapter 6 is also very interesting. Everyone should read Chapter 6. It talks about why is there this difference between scientists are saying we only worry about thermal effect, and a large group of scientists saying we're worrying about biological effects. So that explains the whole rationale behind it. So that's worthwhile. I mean, I eventually hope that this information gets turned into a film, a bit like, we mentioned Brockabits, but also Deep Water. I mean, you've seen that one as well, about Teflon. So there's, those movies that they expose some of the corruption from industry. Last chapter is the risks, expected risks, okay? They're saying that there's going to be, where there's fluid in the body, they're going to see health effects. So renal disease, so there's a lot of blood, so that saying that will increase. There's also concern about eyes, and the eyes can't cool themselves at all. So they're saying there's going to be cataracts, and there's also papers where calves that are born that their mothers have been close to towers have been born with cataracts, as a newborn. Detached retinas, glaucoma, all the rest of it. Next one is skin, because the skin will absorb 90% of the microwaves. So you're going to see a lot of skin cancers they are predicting. And the final point by two very good professors or doctors, you may have heard of these names before, is irresponsible to expose such a large population to a technology that we do not totally know how it's going to affect human health. Putting in tens of millions of 5G antennas without a single biological test of safety has got to be the stupidest idea anyone's ever had in the history of the world. Right? They're very strong on this. I just want to mention this graph. You will find papers that are inconclusive. You will find papers that say there's definitely no harm at all. But the majority, around 70-75%, say there is a health effect. Then you get the sort of no known effect. It's about 20%, and inconclusive can be the rest. So you're getting the majority of saying that there is a biological effect by EMFs. This other site the link will be on the SCENE website. This is a professor that's been collecting all papers for years around EMF. And every month he does an update. And it's a bit hard to see, but there's over 900 research papers. And there's the link. You can download that document. It's around 866 pages long, but they're just the abstracts. It's not the full paper. So that's available for anyone for free to download and have a look through that. What I want to point out is one paper, which is this paper. This paper was at the top of the list today because I've been waiting for August to click over so I can see the new papers. And this was the first one top of the list. And what it's saying, and this is from a cancer research group in Sweden. This is the statement they've got there. So conflicts of interest and ties to the industry seem to have contributed to the biased reports. A lack of proper, unbiased risk evaluation of the 5G technology which places population at risk. Furthermore, there seems to be a cartel of individuals monopolising on evaluation committees, thus reinforcing the no-risk paradigm. We believe that this activity should qualify as scientific misconduct. And this is about 11-page document, so it goes into great detail. This is what they should make a film about. They should get it out there so people realise, not only, most of the people here probably do realise this, but we want the people who are in power, the lawmakers, the law upholders, they need to hear the message as well. I just want to go back in time and just talk about ionising radiation. So when ionising radiation first came out, when Madame Curie discovered, plutonium and all those others, she died of radiation sickness. They call it radiation sickness, aplastic anemia. It's a blood disease. And the reason why, she used to carry around radioactive samples in her pockets. And for historic reasons, they've kept Marie's cookbook. She was obviously a good cook. And the problem is, it's so radioactive, it's actually kept in a lead box. So it will be a long time before it's actually displayed in public. And as time went on, your doctors started doing x-rays, and this x-ray tube is not shielded at all. So he was seeing the break in the ankle there, but the doctor was also getting exposed. Same with this one, look at the breast tissue. His upper body would be exposed. This one's improved a little bit because he's wearing lead gloves, but it's still exposing his head. And they noticed that the actual life was shortening for radiologists. People involved in this work was dropping down. That's when they investigated, and that's when they took action. And we know there's a lot of legislation and safety around ionising radiation. You need a licence just to handle it. So we have monitoring, we have signs, but we haven't got anything like that at all for non-ionising radiation. But as research has shown, it does cause cell damage. It does cause cancer. So what we will suggest here, we use the ALARA principle, which is low as reasonably achievable. So time, try to reduce your time. Distance, increase the distance between you and the radiation or the source. And if necessary, use shielding. So with reducing your exposure, you should be turning your Wi-Fi off at night. So you can see here, this is no disturbances, this is Wi-Fi turned on. And so I've had people say they sleep with their phone underneath their pillow. They should actually be removing that. So try and keep your Wi-Fi out of your bedroom. Best of all, have hardwired. And also you can buy router shielder, which actually makes like a Faraday cage. And you can also have a Wi-Fi that turns off at night, but when no one's using Wi-Fi, it reduces down by 90%. The other thing is about your mobile phone. There is a lot of research out there. So this is an image of a breast showing cancer. There's a cancer nodule, these two areas, and there's the nipple down there. So she's keeping her phone in a bra after a period of between 30 and 21 years. She now has breast cancer. My recommendation is to hardwire your house. As Stephen said before, our house is a modern house. We have Netflix and all the rest of it like everyone else, but it's all hardwired by Ethernet cable. You're best to choose Cat 6A. A is shielded, so it's a better, slightly more expensive, but it's also faster as well. You can shield by paint. If you're building a house, you can use mesh, or you can use paint to paint the walls, and that's very good at basically creating a Faraday cage in your bedroom. There's also fabric that will shield the windows as well. Here is the mesh going on the framing. There's a painted wall. You need to earth the actual wall, and you need to have it going into the earthing point. Or you can have Nova fabric. A lot of people who are renting have like a canopy if they're in an area that's high in EMF. I just want to point a couple of things about children. You can get these slight smart nappies. Well, the phone will tell you when the child's wet his pants or her pants, and then you can go change it. Right? That's emitting an EMF signal, continually around the child. And same with Wi-Fi baby monitors. They are emitting a signal. This is a meter that a Panzer use. This would be nice if I own one, but it's $20,000. And it provides a spectrum. So you can see on the screen there's 5G spectrum. There's the microwave oven spectrum. All microwave ovens leak. Even the most expensive ones leak. So you should be standing away from them when you're cooking. Or better still, don't have one. But I was surprised. The Panzer have got their baby monitor. The baby monitor peak is higher than the microwave and the 5G. That is very powerful. You know, the top of the line there, that is heating. So I would encourage your daughters or your sons not to use baby monitors for their children that are wireless. Wired is okay. Last couple of slides. This is some slides from Geovital. You've got a mobile phone tower. You've got reflection off the tin roof, and you've seen the tree is dying over time. So that's caused through the actual EMF. And this one just shows that there's a tree here that's not has been shielded. This one here is exposed to that across the roof, so the top part is dying over time. So I'll just flick through those. And lastly, as I said before, this is what our towers put out, and these are the effects underneath it, and they've got, you know, the researchers in brackets. Down the very bottom, very small amount, is our phones can operate fully functional at that low level. We don't need that level. We don't even need half of that. We need way down there. So I think, as I said before, I think there should be no more mobile phone towers. I think we should slowly start getting rid of some. And I do agree with, you know, Stephen, 5G pause to consider. The possible health effects are of great concerns to children, adults and elderly in the environment, and more is needed to scientifically evaluate 5G before it's released on the general public. You know, and Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re. Lloyd's of London is the world's largest insurer and has, across the market, refused to provide coverage for all claims arising from exposure to cell phones, Wi-Fi or any other source of electromagnetic frequency radiation. They're not insuring. So that is a clear signal in itself. All right, I think I've used up more than my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Shae Elliss is our next speaker. Shae is the Secretary and Public Officer of the Safe EMF Education Network, SEEN. She has worked in healthcare for the last 6 years. She is an aged and disability carer, specialising in dementia-specific care. She is also a qualified crisis counsellor and Lifeline volunteer. By the end of this year, she will have a BA in psychological science. Shae is pursuing a career as a clinical psychologist. She has excelled academically, being awarded the Stuart Nichols Medal of Excellence. Shae has a 2-year-old son, Griffin, and runs a small business. Shae is the sort of person prepared to take on almost anything. I'm in awe of what this woman has achieved in putting together much of the SEEN website and the materials in the new members pack, which you'll see at the front. Shae, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. You're very kind. First of all, I'd just like to thank you all for coming. It's a great turnout. I can see some familiar faces, which is really nice. So I suppose just to start off, I'm going to explain a little bit about myself, my story, and my experience living next to a cell phone tower. So in April last year, I moved into a house in Lobethal, up in the Adelaide Hills. At the time, I was living with my partner, my mum, and my 6-month-old son. After only a short time, we started feeling the effects of what we now know to be prolonged EMR exposure. It turned out that the house we had moved into was 500 metres away from not one, but 2 cell towers. Now, at the time, cell towers were not on my radar. I had not even considered the proximity of the cell towers to my house. It was only after we moved in and we started feeling the symptoms of exposure that we started to think about, what are cell towers? Are we putting our health at risk? So one of the biggest signs that it was an environmental factor was this constant ringing in our ears. We couldn't get to sleep. It was quite awful. We were depressed. I had insomnia. And I say our because it wasn't just me. It was my mum and my partner as well. So that's kind of how we knew that it was an environmental factor. You move into a house and immediately you have this symptom onset, and it's not just yourself experiencing it, it was all of us. So I'm a very studious and academic person. I decided that I wanted to properly investigate what cell towers were, the technology they used, and consider whether or not I should continue living in this property. Now, we had no clue what was going on. We thought that perhaps the ringing in our ears was caused by faulty wiring. It was an old heritage farm cottage, so it was likely that there was something amiss with the wiring. We had numerous electricians come out and there was nothing wrong. Months went by and we were still suffering. I have never been that depressed in my life. My mum, my partner and I would never experienced ringing in our ears, would never experienced tinnitus. And we were generally, pretty happy people. So it was very clear that it was an environmental factor. So I started researching and I discovered that the phone towers next to my house had 8 different emitters on them: Optus, Vodafone, Telstra and the NBN. One had actually recently been upgraded in April that year, around the same time that we moved into the house, to 4GX, which is kind of like a precursor to 5G. Now, all of this information can be found at the RFNSA website. So if you're curious about the proximity of cell towers to your home, your work or school, I highly recommend you check out the information on the website. Now, I did a little more investigating and I discovered that cell phone towers emit strong electromagnetic fields utilising radio frequency radiation in the microwave part of the spectrum. So it's the same technology that microwave ovens use, just to lower power density. We ended up employing the services of a building biologist who did professional EMR readings of the property. He demonstrated using an EMF meter that there were extremely high radiation levels both outside the home and inside the home. So the towers actually penetrated, it was coming through the windows. Although it was reduced, it was still penetrating the windows. And he actually mentioned that, several of his clients were suffering in the same way as us, which was, heartening to know that we weren't just going crazy. We weren't alone. So something that's really interesting to note is that the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified radiofrequency radiation as possibly carcinogenic to humans based on an increased risk of glioma, a malignant form of brain cancer associated with wireless phone use. Extremely low magnetic fields are also classified as possibly carcinogenic to humans based on studies that have shown that exposure can double the chance of childhood leukemia. Now, from 2017 to 2018, the 3rd leading cause of death of Australian children was brain cancer. The 5th leading cause of death was leukemia. It's clear that we as a society need to start protecting our children from carcinogens. South Australia's own Dr. Bruce Hocking was one of the first researchers to find an association between magnetic field exposure and childhood leukemia. This association is consistent, it's reliable, it's been reported in numerous studies. Another study that I came across in a top neurotoxicology journal found that the prevalence of neuropsychiatric complaints such as mine, headaches, memory changes, dizziness, depressive symptoms, sleep disturbance, were all significantly higher among those living in close proximity to cell phone base stations as opposed to a control group. It wasn't looking positive, but I still wanted to do more research. Surely the government wouldn't be allowing its population to be exposed to a dangerous technology. So I dug a little deeper. Determined to find the truth, I decided to review the dominant scientific literature. Now, having studied a scientific discipline for the last 6 years, I knew that I had to think critically about anything I read. Science is ever evolving, and it involves a continuous process of conjecture and falsification. Influenced by my academic training, I decided to pay close attention to the study design, the statistical methods used, the limitations, and importantly, the source of funding, whether there was potential for bias, and ultimately, whose interests the research serves. Scientists are human. Although they would like to be perceived as such, they are not passive observers. They are susceptible to bias and coercion, and this has to be taken into account when evaluating the credibility of any study. Now, examining the scientific literature, I very quickly came to realise that there are significant differences of expert opinion. We have the industry experts and government organisations such as ARPANSA on the one hand, claiming that these technologies are safe as long as they are within the safe exposure limit guidelines. While on the other hand, we have the independent, non-industry funded experts such as the researchers on the ORSA Advisory Board, Dr. Deborah Davis, Dr. Leonard Hartle, Dr. Darius Lejinsky, just to name a few, all of whom claim that there are significant risks associated with exposure to wireless technologies. If you're interested in hearing a little bit more from the independent experts, we have a large database of studies and several of their testimonies available at our website, www.scene.org.au. So, who are we to trust? Scientific meta-analytic reviews assessing the influence of financial interests in environmental health research have found strong associations between industry-funded research and pro-industry conclusions. Now, for those who don't know, a meta-analysis is where researchers look at all of the literature and determine what the most consistent finding is. So Anne Hoos et al. And Hoos and her colleagues found that studies exclusively funded by industry were indeed substantially less likely to report statistically significant effects on a range of endpoints that may be relevant to health. Another analysis found substantial evidence linking mobile phone use to the risk of developing brain tumours, especially in long-term users. They found that high-quality studies were more likely to show a statistically significant association and that the source of funding affected the quality of the results. Since 1990, Dr. Henry Ley, who's a scientist, researcher and bioengineering professor at the University of Washington, he's been tracking the studies of health effects of RF radiation on humans published around the world. He has hundreds of studies in his database. Of the industry-funded studies, 27% demonstrated a biological effect in humans, whereas independently funded studies found such effects in 68% of the studies. It is clear that industry-funded research is less likely to report adverse health effects associated with RF exposure. Now, Dr. Henry Ley, he believes that a lot of the studies that are done right now are used purely as PR tools for the industry. The question must then be raised, is industry aware of the health effects? Here is a testimonial from Dr. Jerry Phillips, a research biochemist in Colorado.
I moved to California, Southern California. The 60 hertz work that we did was supported by a contract from the Department of Energy. The radio frequency radiation work that we did was supported by Motorola. The relationship was really very cordial and very stress-free, but only up until we started generating data. These folks were very, very upset and began to talk about how are they going to handle this, what sort of spin can we put on this, what can we expect from this, and from that point on the relationship changed. What we saw was that Motorola began to exert more and more control over the work, telling us what to do, telling us how to write abstracts, what to say in the abstracts, what to say in the papers. I said, how to do the work. No, don't do this. Yes, do it this way. This was unacceptable. I had completed our study of DNA damage, and I submitted the final report to Motorola, and I got a call from Mays Swycord at Motorola. Now, Mays is the former head of the Center for, CDRA, Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the FDA, and he left the FDA and went to work for Motorola. Keep that connection in mind. That's interesting. He also handpicked his successor at the FDA. Anyhow, Mays didn't like the work. Then there was another phone call. Point is, I kept getting nothing from these people. They simply weren't willing to accept my interpretation of my study, my evaluation of my study, my knowledge of science at that point, and tried to urge me not to publish the study. They didn't tell me not to. They just said, no, this isn't ready for publication. And they wanted me to do more work. I stopped taking calls from them, and I went ahead and published the study. It came out in 1998, and I wanted nothing more to do with any Motorola-related work. I wasn't going to put up with that kind of control. I wouldn't put up with that attitude. That was it.
So this video is on our website if you want to check it out. I'll make sure that there's a link. So, there are very clear conflicts of interest, and historically, corporations have remained blind to health concerns raised against their products in efforts to maintain industry revenue. You think of cigarettes, thalidomide, DDT, asbestos, and lead, just to name a few. Have you ever heard of the term tobacco science? So there was once a time when the cumulative effect of smoking was denied by health professionals on the basis of flawed industry-funded research. I believe the same is now happening with the wireless industry. So what role does the government play? In 2001, the Australian government made an inquiry into electromagnetic radiation exposure, welcoming submissions from the public. There were 149 submissions, including expert testimonies from Dr. Bruce Hocking, Dr. Henry Lay, Dr. Neil Cherry, who were even back then promoting a precautionary approach to public EMR exposure. As a result of the 2001 inquiry into EMR, the committee chair recommended numerous measures to minimise potential health risks. He emphasised the importance of listening to community concerns about the placement of mobile phone towers, especially when they're near sensitive locations such as schools, people's homes, hospitals. It was recommended that the Australian government adopt a precautionary approach in the setting of exposure safety standards, and that a maximum public exposure limit be set at 200 microwatts per square centimetre. It was also recommended that tower emission beams of greatest intensity are sited away from schools and hospitals, that the Telecommunications Low Facility Determination Act be amended to enable community groups and local councils to have greater authority over the placement of cell towers, and that the government protect children by limiting their exposure to wireless technology and mandating the labelling of mobile phones to ensure that consumers know what the emission levels are. Now, these recommendations are brilliant, aren't they? Unfortunately, they were never implemented. Ever since, the Australian government has allowed the population to endure higher exposure levels, currently at 1,000 microwatts per square centimetre, when compared to other countries. In September last year, there was a similar inquiry into the deployment, adoption and application of 5G in Australia. over 500 submissions were received from doctors, researchers, parents, teachers, people with electro-hypersensitivity, urging the government to protect the public's health and abandon their plans to roll out the untested radiation-emitting 5G infrastructure until it can be proven safe. There were 417 form letters calling for an immediate moratorium. Now, of course, various industry groups also made submissions to the 5G inquiry, expressing their concerns about community opposition interfering with the rollout of the new technology. It has been estimated that 5G, the Internet of Things, and the driverless vehicles will offer a $17 trillion profit margin to the various industries vested in 5G. The chair of Telstra made a submission insisting that any evidence put forwards against the safety of 5G was merely a health scare campaign driven largely by social media and foreign actors. Telstra asked the government to free up more radio bandwidth to make way for the 5G network and, to combat health fears, launch a nationwide campaign to promote their technology. Can you predict what the Morrison government did? The government sided with industry, investing $9 million into a promotional campaign designed to convince the Australian public that 5G is safe. Now, it's interesting because this was December last year when half of our country was on fire. I think that $9 million probably could have been used a little bit wiser. Now, what role does ARPANSA play? The Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency are the government's primary authority on radiation protection. They claim to protect the Australian people and the environment from the harmful effects of radiation. Yet, the standards that ARPANSA wish to maintain are based on the outdated ICNIRP International EMF Human Exposure Guideline, which was only ever based on short-term, immediate thermal effects. So the cumulative, long-term effects are just ignored. In October 2018, an international workshop was held regarding human exposure to radio frequency fields, and they discussed the review of the ICNIRP guideline. The workshop notes stated that the adoption of lower EMF exposure limits is likely to stifle innovation and deployment of networks and may impact on proven social, security and economic benefits that the technology provides to the community. So based on the above statement, a realistic public safety standard would have a major impact on the economic benefits. It's all about money. Public safety is not the primary consideration. It is clear that current exposure standards are based on the potential for increased revenue. So this is the cycle of collusion. So our research agency bases their findings on industry-influenced research. Our government then sets limits based on this biased research, and these regulations then jeopardise the health and safety of our children. Unfortunately, it seems that there are several conflicts of interest of both ICNIRP and ARPANSA members due to their relationships with telecommunications industries. And ultimately, this undermines the impartiality that should govern the regulation of public exposure standards. This is a good quote. Dr. Martin Paul is Professor Emeritus of Biochemistry and Basic Medical Science at Washington State University. He states that ARPANSA avoids all the strongest available science, and that they've produced a stunningly biased document whose positions are repeatedly and consistently contradicted by the strongest science and by large numbers of independent scientists. ARPANSA has failed to protect the health and safety of the people of Australia. ARPANSA has protected the economic interests of the telecommunications industry. Now, it's really important to note that ARPANSA actually hasn't employed any medically trained people. They're not qualified to give medical advice, and this is very clear in their disclaimer. The disclaimer on their website states that it's not a substitute for professional medical advice, that nothing contained in the site is intended to be used as medical advice, and that they do not accept any liability for any injury, loss, or damage incurred by use of or reliance on the information provided on their website. So if APANS is not qualified to give medical advice, why are they dictating the safe exposure standards? And why are the independent, non-industry funded, unbiased scientists being ignored? The World Health Organization has defined the phenomenon where people experience adverse health effects when exposed to devices that emit electromagnetic fields as electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Although APANSA do acknowledge those with electro-hypersensitivity, they do not factor such illnesses into public exposure policy and refer affected individuals to seek medical advice from a qualified medical specialist. So given that I was living directly under not one but two towers, I decided to go see my GP and see what he had to say. He was really great. He was actually really understanding, and although he admit that he did not know very much about wireless technology, he referred me onto the work of Dr. Charlie Teo. Dr. Teo is one of the world's best neurosurgeons. He's based here in Sydney, Australia. He's known internationally for operating on brain tumours that other surgeons would consider inoperable.
Being a specialist in brain cancer, I can tell you that brain cancer is a terrible cancer, like you alluded to. It's the number one cancer killer in children. It kills more children than any other disease, and it kills more young adults than any other cancer. We also know that brain cancer is increasing in frequency. We know that as a fact. With the Interphone study, it was designed to show that there was no link between brain cancer and mobile phone usage, but indeed it showed that there was a link in those people who use their phones for what they call high usage, which was only half an hour a day. I also know that they excluded two very, very high risk groups, and that is children, less than 18, and corporate users of mobile phones who tend to use their phone more than other people. I also know that I had a patient who had brain cancer who was exposed to huge amounts of EMR from owning a transport company. He said he was on it for at least 8 hours a day, and so were his partners, and they weren't related at all, but he died of brain cancer. All 4 partners in the company died of brain cancer, and then his wife rang us up 2 years after he died to say that the secretary, who was also on the mobile phone, died of brain cancer. So I do know that if you're exposed enough to EMR, you will get brain cancer and you'll die from it.
Now, this is some new modeling, again, that we've developed with colleagues in Brazil, and we can share with you how we've done it. We first start out with the MRI, and here is what it looks like after a period of 6 minutes. And that's really not as bad as it might look, because you see the red area only gets partway through the eye of the adult. The one that we're really concerned about is this one with the young child. And this is a 3-year-old brain that we modeled. And you see that by the end of that 6-minute call, the peak radiation, yellow and red, is getting all the way into almost both eyes. These studies have been done taking sperm from healthy men. And one test tube gets exposed to cell phone radiation, and one test tube is not exposed to mobile phone radiation. And then the results are evaluated. And this is a measure of vitality. We measure how well the sperm swim. This is a measure of motility. This is a measure of mitochondrial DNA damage. They have 3 times as much damage on their DNA if they have been exposed to mobile phone radiation as compared to controls. Berkeley, California has unanimously passed the cell phone right to know law. It's called an ordinance, requiring notification that if you carry your phone in your pants or shirt pocket or tucked into a bra when the phone is on, you may exceed the federal guidelines for exposure to RF radiation. This is a website that has all of the fine print warnings, so far as we know them, available.
So, after watching these videos, it was pretty clear that my family's health was at stake. My decision was made. So I broke a 2-year lease and I decided to move to a property as far away from a cell tower as I could possibly find. I ended up being diagnosed with electro-hypersensitivity by a specialist, Dr. Kerry Harris, up in Blackwood. And ever since, I've been living 7 k's away from the nearest cell tower, and guess what? All of my symptoms have disappeared. I'm not getting migraines. I don't have ringing in my ears. My immune system's awesome. I'm not getting sick anymore. I feel really good. And I think that's evidence enough that it was an environmental factor. Unfortunately, when I do expose myself to EMR, when I go into the city, when I'm at someone's house and they have Wi-Fi on, my symptoms do reoccur. I think that the time I spent living next to a cell tower did some permanent damage, because now I'm hypersensitive. I do regularly have to, I have to go home and I have to ground myself and ensure that I limit my exposure to, I don't come to the suburbs much anymore. I don't shop next to supermarkets with cell towers anymore, because I can't stand the migraines. It's debilitating. And I have a son to look after, and I'm also completing a degree, so I need my brain to work. So my experiences since April last year, and the overwhelming number of people I have met since then that share my concerns, inspired me to become part of SEEN so that I can play my part in the development of solutions that safeguard the community and those most vulnerable from unnecessary EMF exposure. I'm actually really shocked by the number of daycare facilities and schools that are right next to cell towers. These are sensitive locations. Cell towers should not be put up. And, there's even cell towers on school grounds. Obviously, the landowners get a big payoff, but I think the health and safety of our children is more important than money. So, our committee consists of 7 professionals, all of whom are dedicated to EMF safety. We are working under the guidance of Barrister Raymond Broomhall from Tasmania. He's president of the No 5G Inc, and they are on their way to becoming the first No 5G political party in the world. He's assisting litigants throughout the country in their objections to infrastructure. He's had some great success in the past. So if you've recently found out that a small cell installation or a cell tower is going up in your neighbourhood, like the 10-metre Optus tower that is proposed right here in Merino opposite the community hall, we're here to help you with the objection process. We're doing all we can to assist litigants to protect their safety. And it's not just the health effects either. I don't think anyone's going to want to buy a house next to a cell tower in the near future. So it's also jeopardising the market value of your property if you have a cell tower going up right at the front of your home. So it's my belief that local councils and communities should have the right to object to installations, especially when they're close to people's homes and schools. Given that the rollout of 5G will require vastly more wireless antennas, higher frequency ranges and higher energy output, SEEN is dedicated to doing all we can to facilitate safe zones for those who do not wish to be exposed. Our ultimate goal is to see a complete moratorium on the rollout of 5G in Australia. Now, as we've heard from Tim, 5G will enable wireless cars, faster download speeds, and the rise of artificial intelligence. Now, I can say as a representative of the millennial generation, I grew up with this technology. I had a flip phone when I was 12. I remember when we went from dial-up to Wi-Fi. And ultimately, these benefits are not worth the risk. I went to a 21st birthday party late last year, and there were 25 of us sitting around a table, and everyone was on their phones. Everyone was staring into a screen. No one was talking to one another. These are people I hadn't seen since high school, 5-6 years ago. And they were all looking into their screens. They weren't socialising. I think my generation's in big trouble. We're all incredibly socially disconnected. We're all addicted to our screens. Depression, anxiety and mental health issues that are at an all-time high. So, ultimately, I'm here tonight to share my story with you. I'm doing everything I can to ensure that this is not the future that I leave for my children. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Shae. That was wonderful to hear. Susan Howlett is going to speak next. Susan's a a fully qualified dance educator with over 30 years teaching experience. She's worked in dozens of schools, primary and secondary, teaching performing arts to children. Susan also holds a diploma of counselling and is passionate about health and well-being. Susan already has had a go at waking people up on the issue of 5G, holding a meeting in Marion during early 2019, I think. She has specialised in the effect that Wi-Fi and other EMFs have on children. So, over to you, Susan.
Hello everyone. It's been a really good talk so far. I've been really enjoying everything that I've heard. I'm a little bit tall for this. There we go. Okay, so yes, just like a lot of people, I was always on my phone and running my business from my phone, and also personally. So, you know, Instagram, Facebook, fantastic, just loved it. And also running my business from there, and then you'd get on and check emails and all the rest of it. So constantly on my phone. I can't remember when I first got my phone, but I actually was one of those people that said I'm never going to get a mobile phone, and was like that for a long, long time. So probably, what am I now, 49, so probably just before 30 I got a phone. I started to experience some electromagnetic sensitivities, and basically the first thing that would happen was I would get a buzzing hand when I was on the phone, or my head would start to get really hot. So that was the sort of first thing that I noticed, is just that buzzing, and I'd change my hand over and shake my hand out, and I'd just be doing things like that. So that would be one of the things that would happen a lot. I'd also start to feel quite drained. I'd have sore eyes and just feeling a bit off, bit fatigued. In fact, I remember quite a few times just actually saying, I've got to get off this thing, and just chucking it down on the bed or trying to get away from the phone for a while. But, you know, these are very addictive technologies, and now I realise I was on my phone all the time, just constantly. So what happened after a while is it started to progress into headaches. Now, I always suffered from headaches. I've always had things like migraines from doing too much, using my eyes too much. Tax time would be sometime I would usually get a migraine. But I was starting to get headaches now really, really often, and they were different headaches. They weren't the sort of headache that you take a Panadol and it would go away. It would be a prolonged, intense pressure headache, and it was pretty much untouchable with ibuprofen or codeine or Panadol, and it would last a long, long time. So my doctor and I, we were working on things like that, trying to work out where the headaches were coming from. After a while, I started to notice with my phone use that I had a lot of breathlessness, and my heart was racing a lot. And that was the point I sort of thought, what is going on with me? I thought maybe I had some sort of anxiety or things like that, but I never was connecting it with the phone. I was just always thinking, you know, what's going on with me? Something's wrong with me. So I was looking at health and nutrition and sleep and things like that. I wasn't realising at the time too that my electricity meter was actually outside of my house, and I was sleeping within a metre or two of the electricity box. So everything sort of, when it started unravelling, it started happening quite fast. So what happened is I went away on a 5-day trip to the York Peninsula, and I decided that I was going to have a Wi-Fi free and a no device. I just was going to go away and detox. And I was on the beach. It was in a little place in between Port Victoria and Moonta. No towels anywhere. I was there for 5 days. After about 3 days, I started feeling amazing. I felt really clear. I felt really normal. I felt really good in myself. I mean, you do when you go on a holiday, of course. But I just started to feel different in my body and in myself. And I started writing and doing things like that. when I actually came back from that holiday, I was so discombobulated, it was crazy. It was very quick too. I got home, I unpacked, and I just was doing things like walking down to the kitchen and then just thinking, what am I doing? Walking back, and it was immediate. I was discombobulated, I love that word. So that's how I felt, and I just thought, what is going on? So I was really unsettled, I was really anxious and irritable, and in my body I just felt yuck. When I had my phone on, the palpitations started happening again, and this time, because I'd had none of it for 5 days, it was just like a neon light. I thought, something's going on, something's wrong here. So everything changed after I got my EMF meter, bought myself an EMF meter, and I started investigating, and I watched the 5G summit that was online with all the different speakers, which was fantastic and very eye-opening, and got myself this meter, and I actually started testing readings off of towers and on my phone, and I just thought, wow, this is really full on. I don't know if you've seen a meter, but if you do have a meter and you hold it next to a phone, it's a great thing for kids because you can hear the buzzing and you can see and hear the sound, and it's just, it's a stronger impact for people to understand that, if you turn your whole phone off onto airplane mode and test it with a meter, it's quiet. But as soon as you put on something like Facebook, you'll hear the and see the meter going. And it just shows you that that's what's happening around your body. So I started turning the mobile data off. I moved my bed away from the wall in the room. I started using speakerphone only. But what I want to tell you about is when my eyes really truly opened to the level of electro-smog that we're sort of being bathed in our homes, was when I actually got a modem. Now, I wasn't wanting to get a modem at all, but because my son, who's now 14, was going to high school, Seaview High, they have a big tower about 200 metres away from Seaview, and Seaview High is also put its hand up basically to be the 5G school of one of the 5G schools of Adelaide. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. So I had to get a modem because my son, 14, going to school, he's like, Mum, I can't use this module, what is it called? The dongle, that's it. We need a modem. So I thought, okay, we'll get a modem, and I've got to make sure I have one that has a little button on the top so that we can turn it off, the Wi-Fi off. So Internode came, they set up the modem, they turned it on and they left. I had bought Ethernet cables for all of the devices. I've even got adapters and everything for my son's iPad, so everything hardwired. And the top of the modem had the switch to turn it on or turn it off. However, it was still emitting EMF. It still was emitting. Now, it's in the main room where I have my kitchen and dining room and area, and I could feel the effects. My heart was racing. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, look, you've turned it off there. Surely you're just being silly. You're just being anxious about this. Surely it's fine. So I got my meter out and tested it, and it was emitting. At that point, I sort of got very upset. So I called a friend who has helped with the hardwiring of Upper Sturt Primary School, which is a primary school here in the state. It's completely hardwired. And she talked me through how to disable the Wi-Fi component on the modem. So on the modem, when you turn it upside down or on the back of the modem, you will see a username and a password. That is your gateway into your modem, and you can actually disable the Wi-Fi component in your modem. I've helped so many people by sharing that, so it's a really good thing to do, just get the hardwire ether. The interesting thing is I did that, and then instantly every sensation just left my body. I felt it just all dissipated, but I was left with the most excruciating migraine that lasted about 4 solid days. It was one of the worst I've ever had. So, yeah, lots of concerns around that. And of course, you know, I've got a family, I've got lots of friends, they don't understand it, and I'm the strange one, so. But that's okay, I don't mind being the strange one. So just here is some paediatrics patients. These are children. I work with kids. I've taught children now for nearly 30 years, over 30 years actually, dance. So this is a 15-year-old girl suffering pain in her ear when using the cell phone. She has a headache when others in her class use cell phones next to her, or if they're charging phones around her. After the headache subsides, she feels cloudy in her head, forgets words, feels numb for several hours, and these symptoms do not happen when she goes on holiday. 12-year-old boy began feeling EHS symptoms last year, suffers a headache every day at school, he gets pains in his legs, he's usually keeping his cell phone in his trousers, he gets tingling hands, concentration difficulties. So I teach dance to kids. One of the schools that I'm in is at McGill, and this is like many, many other schools that have towers around them, but this particular tower was hidden between lots and lots of trees, so I didn't even know there was a tower there. I'd been teaching at the school for 14 years. I was in the western side of the school, and I was fine, taught there. They had some upgrades in the school, and I was put to a class in the eastern side of the school, right next to the school oval, and I started to have the sensations, the palpitations, and when I drive home I would always have a headache that would just be sort of starting to come on. So I didn't really think about it much because I couldn't see a tower there and I hadn't had my phone on. But I was packing up my stuff one day and I looked out over the oval and I could see a 4GX tower that was about 200 metres away in direct line of sight of the classroom. And it was interesting because I teach children that are at that school in year one, from year 1 to year 4. And, you know, sometimes kids do get tired, but this particular classroom, I would constantly have kids coming up to me and saying, I feel icky. I don't know why, but I've got a headache. Can I lie down? Or they would just be sitting outside on the veranda eating their snacks next to the oval, and they'd come in and they'd just lie on the floor. And I'd be going, come on, up you get. It's time to dance, not time to lie down and have a sleep. So I've just been noticing with these kids, you know, and kids are excellent because they just show everything completely on their body, you know, everything's down and looking up at me. So when I saw that actual tower, I just thought, oh, that's what's happening here. So being a teacher, I'm a performing arts teacher. I've taught in dozens of schools, hundreds of thousands of children. My concerns for the health of children around, especially Seaview High School, for example, you know, they have to have an iPad. The iPad's in the class, so you've got, 26 kids on an iPad, all becoming an antenna to the router in the room. Other classrooms around it also got the routers and the modems and iPads. And then you've got the tower down the road. So my son is being irradiated all day. Now, as a teacher, we have a duty of care. We are mandated notifiers. And I find it really, really interesting that schools are rolling this out and there's no consent forms about this and that it's happening. So my question is, who's liable? If my kid by the end of school, you know, has a tumour or starts to have chronic health problems, who's liable? Is it me, I've sent him there? Or is it the school because they're using the devices and they're irradiating them? So we have consent forms for everything, for latex, for, you know, you can't take nuts to school. Aerosols are not allowed to be used because they're harmful. But there's nothing, absolutely nothing on electromagnetic radiation or frequencies. I am in scene because I'm really passionate about that. I really want to get that out of the schools and one of the main things is that there is no liability. All of the insurance companies globally will not touch EMR. They will not insure it. So there's no liability. It's just this sort of void. But also, on the other hand, it is something that we can focus on. Who is liable, you know? And we can hold somebody liable. Well, if you're the principal of the school or if you're the governing council or whatever, then I want to make sure my child is safe at school. The other thing with what you saw in Tim's presentation is child's vulnerability is 60% greater than an adult. They're still in developing bodies. So their SAR, the specific absorption rate, is much, much higher around these devices. This is just an interesting one because this is a captain of a Canadian air carrier, and he's writing on there about having read a lot of research on this topic and hearing firsthand how other airline employees are reacting to Wi-Fi in hotel rooms and elsewhere. I'm certain that this form of radiation is having a negative health effect on many of us. The number of airline employees this year, including pilots and flight attendants who report having difficulty with Wi-Fi, seems to be growing. Evidently, there are some pilots off sick with mysterious Parkinson's-like symptoms. I can experience ill effects including nausea, shortness of breath, overall body weakness when in a sustained Wi-Fi environment. I have difficulty focusing and have skin reactions. So there's another one that's just there. On the SCENE website under the schools, you will see a really fantastic, very, very short video showing an alfalfa sprouts experiment that children do in the classroom. It's excellent. So if you have a look under the schools section on SCENE, and you can show kids that one. Or even anybody, it's a really good one to see actually, because they make 2 Faraday cages and they have alfalfa sprouts. And they have 2 modems in there. One is not turned on, one's emitting, and the one that's emitting, none of the sprouts rise. So it's really good. And the kids themselves are saying things before like, I don't think it's going to do anything, you know, nah. And then afterwards they're like, wow, if that's what it did to the plants, what's it doing to us?
We talked, what are we? We're pioneer scientists here. This is like a sort of experiment that it's really hard to find anything like it. So this is like pretty groundbreaking stuff. We're gonna grow some plants inside of there. One of them without Wi-Fi signal, one of them with Wi-Fi signal. They're called Faraday cages. So one of them will be putting out radiation where the other one is not gonna be doing that.
I don't think anything's gonna happen. I don't really know.
I don't know, because it's just like this plastic thing with technology in it. But like, we don't know if that'll affect the plant.
I don't really feel like radiation affects me in any way, so I don't feel like it's gonna affect another living thing like a plant.
Have you done this experiment before, or is this new?
We have seen an experiment using cress seeds and radiation, but never as controlled as this one, as far as I know.
Not really.
Are you sure about that? Go straight in. Oh, we're good. Yeah. Full send.
Yeah, one of them is going to be exposed to high levels, and the whole reason that we've covered them in tinfoil is because the environment of this classroom is filled with that. Right, so we had to try to isolate the plants inside of there and not let the Wi-Fi get in there.
I don't really know if it'll affect anything because, like, I grow plants in my, like, I have Wi-Fi in my house and I grow plants all the time and they grow fine.
It's gonna die.
You think so?
Yeah. it blew my mind that the Wi-Fi off, like, the plants are growing.
Yeah.
But Wi-Fi on, the plants are growing. So I think that when the Wi-Fi's on, it's affecting the world, like affecting the whole entire world.
What are people's arguments against our results going to be?
The Wi-Fi on might have dried out all of the water from the seedlings.
The heat will evaporate the water that's in the plant.
The FCC doesn't say anywhere that Wi-Fi and radiation is harmful to people.
I think that we have to explore those different variables to make this experiment as sound as we can. What's the first thing that you're going to do? You get your cell phone in your hands, you just watch that video. What are you going to Google?
Does Wi-Fi kill plants? Or other living things?
First thing I would look up is what else can it hurt?
What?
Our brain, our arms, our legs. Does Wi-Fi hurt our body physically and mentally? Could it affect your sperm count and decrease population?
What?
Given the fact that you have been part of this research, looking over all of these studies, do you have Wi-Fi in your house?
No, I've been in the technology industry all my life, and I've never had Wi-Fi.
Because?
I just didn't feel it was right. I didn't feel it was safe. And my wife has been very actually forceful about not having that. Now, you can run a longer wire. It's a bit annoying.
Signaling. Produce heat.
Have any countries or cities banned Wi-Fi?
Okay. So we have had a success seen when we very first got together. There was a proposed small cell just outside of Westminster Primary School. So we were helping some of the parents over there to go around and to talk to the Early Childhood Learning Centre and the Westminster schools, and that small cell was relocated. So there is, positive outcomes. I mean, it was relocated not very far away, but it still was a lot further away from the school, which was good. Yep. So my involvement with SEEN has not been as massive as Shae. She's amazing. But I'm here definitely to talk to people and to help collate volunteers. I'm really, like I said, passionate about the schools. We've got other people that are looking at health. My GP has been incredible. In fact, she's opposed smart meters on her house as well as her whole family's. She's helped to write a letter for the school. So we do want to just keep expanding and educating and helping people. And one of the best things that you can do right now is to just start to do some safe practices around keeping your phones off, hardwiring devices, disabling your modem, getting your bed away from different things in your home, that's emitting and things like that. So there are things that we can do. And I know this is a heavy subject and it's quite depressing in some ways, but there is a lot of things that we can do. And I think if we can make sure that our own personal environment and how we use the devices and the technology is really mindful, then you're going to alleviate a lot of problems for yourself. And also keeping away from hotspots. For example, Rundle Mall is a massive hotspot. Massive hotspot. All right, so I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The Aaron Brockovich film is still going. Still going. Look, not being a physicist myself, I'm perhaps more qualified to talk about the social impacts which the 5G technology will enable. And since I became aware that electromagnetic radiation was a real issue, I've been reading about it and reading about all sides of it. Tonight I've brought just a couple of my friends with me. Friends being books, because having finished a PhD and done research, I like the long thoughts. It's all very nice to watch a couple of little videos on YouTube and watch, a couple of little articles and look at a few things, but I've got hold of a couple of books here. One of them is by a man, Arthur Furstenberg, and he wrote The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life. Behind this book goes literally thousands and thousands of hours of research and study. This section of the book are the references, that whole last section. It is incredibly well researched, and one of the people who wrote a comment, he was Professor Emeritus William E. Morton, MD, from Oregon Health Sciences University, said, "I was stunned by this book. It is an extremely valuable account of an increasingly widespread environmental health risk to which we are all exposed. I am overwhelmed with admiration for what Furstenberg has accomplished." And I don't expect many people here will read it, but it's good to know that there are people, as a researcher that knows nothing about this, I just had to look and try and find who I could trust. And that's the issue. Find out who you can trust. People with vested interests who are going to make a lot of money out of a particular wireless technology, or people that have had an issue with it personally, as this man had. He had to live out of his car like a refugee. He tried to, his neighbour's Wi-Fi was affecting him, and so he tried to do something about that, talk to them reasonably, then tried to sue them, and he got himself, he's had a terrible time of it all. And he started the 5G appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space. And anyone can go and be a signator to that appeal. So, there is another book that I came across, and it's called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future in the New Frontier of Power, by Shoshana Zuboff. Now, she wrote, as one viewer commented, a step-by-step account of the building of the digital iron cage. Get that little words, those few words, the digital iron cage. So, when my wife and I bought our first, where are they? First little red Nokias, remember them? Hey, good on you, mate, good on you. Well, we bought this. This was a product that made it possible to communicate. When we bought our smartphones, we became the product that was communicated to what Zuboff calls Big Other, because Big Brother was too personal. We're talking about now the Internet of Things, where we become one of the things. And we all sort of know this. I can see nodding going on, because we know it, and yet we keep using it, and we don't really know how to turn off different parts of it that are going to tell somebody, and then we find something comes up that we like, and we think, oh, that's good, yes, I think I will get that. Because it knows us. It's getting to know us. So, Zuboff writes on page 518 of Surveillance Capitalism, she writes the following: should we grow weary of our struggle for self-determination and surrender instead to the seductions of Big Other, we will inadvertently trade a future of homecoming for an arid prospect of muted sanitised tyranny. A third modernity that solves our problems at the price of a human future. It is a cruel perversion of capitalism and the digital capabilities it commands. Now for the 8-word sentence of this book that perhaps sums up so much of the new technology. And it's simply this: it gives so much, but it takes so much more. Takes so much more. It is not hard to be seduced by the promises of 5G, which you will increasingly see in the media and through government advertising. However, there are towns, councils, counties, shires and cities and even countries that are calling for a pause on 5G until it has been safety checked. There are a host of books and long papers about ways of employing the technology that we already have that are much better in so many ways than the wireless world that the big telcos plan to make so much profit from. I'm reading a paper at the moment, it's about 150 pages. It's titled Reinventing Wires, the Future of Landlines and Networks. And here is part of a review of it written by the past president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, who writes, but if you can remember Frank Clegg, he does have a beautiful little video of 10 minutes in which he just suggests, find out about it, please. You should find out about it. Anyway, he says of this paper sets the record straight and fills our current information vacuum, offering consumers, business leaders and policymakers the critical facts that they need to rethink a more intelligent and secure future with reliable, secure, wired communication, more resilient to storm, flood and fire, reducing the enormous carbon footprint from the present wireless approach. It's a huge carbon footprint. It also demonstrates why the mistaken upcoming 5G frenzy, with its millions of small cell antennas designed to cluster all neighbourhoods in public right-of-ways, is dangerous, wasteful and unnecessary. Corporations will invariably seek the cheapest, quickest and most profitable path, which is what's led to the current emphasis on wireless. Far too long have we been misled, turned astray by corporate propaganda, by compromised politicians and by our own technical ignorance into accepting inferior, problem-ridden, expensive wireless systems. Importantly, wireless systems also have negative economies for speed, such as the speed becomes progressively more expensive, which then requires more spectrum and more cell sites. The sturdy, wired communication infrastructure, using wireless only as an adjunctive technology, has vast potential to become the electronic commons essential to commerce, education, jobs, the economy and social cohesion. Even though, I'm just crying for the world, the way in which we had a wonderful technology in something which is just light, that goes through wires. And it's so simple, but we took on, and I did it, I took on the convenience of not having a little cord. And that's the thing that we all suck up for. We just want it so convenient that we can talk to anyone, anywhere, and take pictures anywhere and store it somewhere. And that is creating so much problems in the world, just in storing all that stuff. And it's so silly, because we're not enjoying life nearly as much as we could. Some of us in this room remember a time before computers, before mobile phones. I do. And it was a different world. I got sucked in like everybody. And I was watching Netflix series, which were really well produced, beautifully done. But really, my hands swelled up 12 12 months ago from now, my hands were like this. It was because of this. I'm sure it was. I'm sorry. I don't expect to be emotional about this. But it's my grandchildren too that I can't help but think of. They've got little things in their ears all the time. They're on it all the time with their phones and taking pictures all the time and thinking it's wonderful. And so, thank you for that. And so, here I am. I've now gone on the board of scene, and I'm thinking of. I'm even thinking of starting a newspaper because I've got so much to say. It seems ridiculous. Anyway, I think I'm over it. So, yeah, look, I will probably have at least one, the spring edition of the Global Local, it'll be called. The Global Local. And Merino Town Hall will be Global Local Central. And I really now want to, if I went on, I'd start crying again. So now I better get on to some thank yous. I want to thank the board of the 5G Pause to Consider group. In a second. We are not into committees. We decided to go straight to a board. I won't mention who you are, but you know, and your assistance has meant so much in making this a successful educational experience, even if somewhat emotional. The 5049 Coastal Community for allowing us to place our flyer in the 5049 Communicator newsletter, which reached every home in the 5049 postcode. It's so valuable and rare to live in a place where a local community group cares about a minority group with views not recognised by the mainstream. It is a gesture that reveals a generosity of spirit, which is much appreciated. I want to thank the councillors and all the audience for attending tonight and being so well behaved with no hugging, although it would be really nice to have a hug in right now. I appreciate your restraint and that I've been able to retain the $5,000. One never knows who's watching. Look, I really do want to thank you all for coming, and that's really it for the evening. I don't know where this is headed, and that's why I haven't put forward a plan. We haven't got a campaign strategy at this point. We wanted to have a meeting where we could share and educate some people. There will be a little website. There is a donation box at the end there, a green Kleenex, an old Kleenex tissue box which has been painted green. And if you think you got value out of tonight, yeah, do drop something in there. But that's not the issue. What the issue is whether there are people that want to take this further. Because unfortunately, if 5G comes into our street, my wife, who is electromagnetic sensitive particularly, and I will have to leave the district. And we love the place. We'd love to be here. So I just hope that there are people that want to help us to do something about this, because it's a global problem, but if you don't act locally and do something, then nothing happens. So we'll see. Thank you so much. So now, any questions? And the panel is here. We'll take this away. If you stand up and have the question, then someone can answer from the mic.
In the blue scarf. Can I answer that one, please? Sorry, Stephen said we don't have any campaign strategies, but we do. Look, the first thing...
He's only a newbie.
Yeah. The first thing that you can do is get on our website or check out the checklists at the back of the room. Approach your health professional. All right? So the first thing we need to do is get the health professionals on board. Okay? We're also looking for lawyers to litigate against the deployment. Not very many lawyers are willing to take on the telecommunication industries because they're loaded, and ultimately it's hard, it's difficult. But we are being guided by the barrister in Tasmania, and he has developed a 22-step strategy. The data collection tool for any lawsuit or legal case is available on our website under EMR Legal Options. So that's the first step. Approach your health professional. Get their professional medical advice. We have, if you become a member, we have pro formas, we have letter templates, we have info packs. The first two things really, educate yourself, mitigate, protect yourself first, protect your family first, and then start thinking about the broader community. Approach your health professional. Find us a lawyer in South Australia who'd be willing to take on this case. That would be awesome.
I live in Marino. My question. Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
About the last pandemic, the Spanish flu, some researchers suggest actually it was the electrification of the world. It affect the Spanish flu. That is not actually a virus. What about your opinion about the Spanish flu and relation with the electrification of the world? Electromagnetic wave. And what about the recent pandemic? Is there any relation with this sort of relation?
Okay, on our website there's a really great article under news, and I think Tim probably is the best person to answer this question. But if you check out our website under latest news, there's a really brilliant article written by a doctor. I can't remember his name, but I'm going to give it to Tim.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there on the internet. I haven't really seen any research around it though. There's been people who've been coming forward and been concerned about the effects of 5G on the oxygen molecule, and it's giving them. There's even Geovital did a interview of a doctor who was saying it's like altitude sickness, and I tried to find that video, but that video has been pulled down. So they're going around and actually removing content about this. So it would be good to see eventually if there's some sort of research comes out about this, but there are people speaking up and then they're being pulled down. So.
I think it's important to note that these technologies do affect the immune system. As a society, that if there's global impaired immune function, then it's likely that we're going to start seeing greater prevalence of disease and virus.
Good evening. Just on that that you were talking about, and you were saying about the studies, there's a great doctor that I've been researching, Dr. Andy Kaufman, and he has some great videos. I suggest everybody go and look at them if you're interested.
And
because
Buttar as well, another name?
Yes, Rashid Buttar. So Andy Kaufman, in one of his videos, talked about a study actually done way back in the 1960s about 5G, 60 gigahertz millimetre waves way back then. And it was lab mice in the study, and the lab mice were exposed to the millimetre waves constantly. I don't know for how long. What they found was the short-term response from the lab mice was that it made their immune system switch on and have to fight something, like you're fighting off something. But then after the longer-term exposure, the lab mice developed two things in that particular study. One was Tim said, is the hemoglobin production protein was inhibited, greatly inhibited. So hemoglobin, what that does is it transfers, it travels oxygen throughout our body. And if we don't have oxygen going throughout our body, what happens is we get organ failure. So the lab mice had organ failure and they died, right? Or they got very sick and a chronic organ issue. The other thing, the second thing that happened, according to this study, was the lab mice stopped being able to produce the bone marrow. And our bones produce white blood cells and red blood cells. And if we don't have the production of new blood cells in our bone marrow, we basically have an extremely low immune system and we die because we get sick very easily and we don't have the option to fight off anything. So that's just one study from way back then. Dr. Andy Kaufman, Dr. Rashid Buttar, of course, these guys are being censored left, right and centre, but they are medical professionals, they are researchers, they know what they're talking about, and at least from their perspective, they have some great information. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's really useful information. Sounds like you're very educated on the topic.
Oh, hello. I'm from Birdwood, actually. I've come all the way down for this because back in 2006, I spearheaded a big fight up there to try and stop a big phone tower going up on the hill behind Birdwood, the most beautiful backdrop.
I know the one.
Yeah. And there was already 3 phone towers to the east of the town, and we fought and fought to get Telstra to put that phone tower with the other 3. We went to the council meeting, and who turned up but Telstra's lawyers, like 3 in suits, and we were just beaten down. They have all the power. The council, I get on really well with the council, the Adelaide Hills Council, they know me very well. They just tell me they have no power to stop these towers going pretty much anywhere. It doesn't matter how much the community screams their head off about it or even puts up alternatives. So that's what the problem is in this country. Now, in London, the Greensborough Council, they tried to roll out 5G in the London area. The community got together and sued the council, and they've actually won the case. Now, I don't know whether the laws in England are different. I somehow suspect they must be, because I can't see that happening here. I really can't. And I'm just wondering, if this is not a personal question, people, am I the only one in the room who's never owned a mobile phone? I absolutely refuse to own a mobile phone. So there we have it. Everyone is completely stuck on their mobiles because they're so convenient. But you must get rid of them. That is the only way. And that is a very difficult thing to do. I know it is. But honestly, I am so happy that I'm quite, happy to live my life without one. And I've got my landline. How many people have still got their landline? Good. Try and get them back. That's the only thing I can say, really. And also that book you mentioned, Stephen, the rainbow one, is there any mention in there of geopathic stress lines, electricity problems through the ground? Do you know about that? No? Well, this is yet another another
Tim's the guy.
level of electro-stress problems that we have. And if you want to know about it, look up Jürgen Schmidt. He actually lives in Harndorf, and he's written a very good book about geopathic stress lines through the ground. It is really interesting, and people just don't know about it.
Yeah, he has come to our home and done...
Oh, has he? Oh, very good. Because you might have to shift your bed if you're not sleeping properly.
This is the sort of thing that Tim Sawyer does, our speaker.
Oh, very good.
Say something about it.
Yep,
I just say-
no worries.
Yeah, part of my assessment is looking at geopathic stress, and I've come across some really good cases. One actually was my wife, where we moved into a rental property before we were building our house. Her right ankle swelled up, went red, went to the doctor, said you must be allergic to a tree. So I thought, well, I haven't actually looked at this house myself, right? It was just a short-term accommodation. So I did a geopathic stress measurements, and there was an intersection right over her ankle. So they're about 40 centimetres wide, so we moved the bed 40 centimetres to the side, and within 3 days it all went down and went away. And I've had a lot of cases like children bedwetting as well, chronic bedwetters at a late age, geopathic stress, remove that and they stop wetting the bed. There's a lot to geopathic stress. There's some very good books out there, particularly in Europe. A lot of the doctors recommend their clients to have a geopathic assessment of their house. And even schools do, because children who aren't performing very well are in the one spot, in the one chair. They rotate the children on a monthly basis around the classroom.
Another thing I just wanted to quickly mention is Raymond Broomhall. I know you mentioned that the council feel quite powerless, and I've heard that quite a few times. Raymond Broomhall's criminal assault strategy is basically a different approach. So we're not working under the guise of the Telecommunications Act, which is federal legislation, and that's why state and local councils feel like they have no power, because it's federal legislation. But his strategy basically involves state-level criminal legislation, because ultimately it's criminal to assault someone that doesn't consent to being irradiated. So I'd highly recommend looking at Raymond Broomhall's strategies. That's the strategy that we're following. He's had some success in Randwick Council in New South Wales. He successfully litigated against 900 small cell installations. 450 of them were already active, and they were torn down. So that was TPG. I think that was 2017. So there is options. We've just got to explore them.
Oh, g'day. Oh, so can I just say, firstly, I really respect the fact that you're getting involved and that you've got something you are passionate about and that you're trying to make change. So I don't actually agree with you, but I do really respect the fact that you're being involved in the community. One of the questions I had was, a lot of the things that you've brought up are a mixture between social effects of social media, between perceived effects of 5G, radiation, insurance for cars, and a broad range of things. What's your main aim, or is it just all of the above?
Our main aim is to help people mitigate the risks. Our main aim is to help people protect themselves and to give people with electro-hypersensitivity a voice. The broader goal is to see an EMF safe environment or safe zones for the community who don't wish to be exposed. I think that it's really important for communities to have autonomy, and I think a lot of communities and local councils are feeling as though they're losing their autonomy when telecommunication industries are coming in and saying, I'm putting a tower here and I'm putting a small cell here, and you can't say anything, you can't do anything about it. I think that that is the most crucial issue. Communities should have the right to say no, and people should have the right to say no to being exposed to radiation-emitting devices, even if you think it's not worth, even if you don't think that there is any health risks, we should still have the right to say no.
Look, thanks. You've exposed us to all the medical issues, which is very interesting to hear, and I support a lot of it because of my past life in a job that I've heard. looked at electromagnetic radiation and its effect on individuals. However, that's why I'm concerned. One, does anyone know the exact site where the tower is going to be located? I've sent an email to both the state member and the federal member. The state member has not responded. He's not responded to two other emails that other people have sent. The federal one just got back to me this week. It's apparently on state-owned land. Now, the exact site of that, where I'm sure it just says 8 Hewlett Avenue. So, is anyone here that's got some clear understanding of exactly where that site will, so it will impact on everyone that lives in Hewlett Avenue and stuff?
No, not exactly at this stage, but that is something that we can find out, and that will be my next letter. I did get a letter from Chris Hannah just the other day. They had made a mistake. They wrote to me and said that it was already up. And I went looking and I said, sorry, Chris, I don't think it's really up. And so then they had a rain check on that and got in touch with Optus, and then they said, no, well, they were going to put it up last year, but they didn't. And so now at least we will be, anyone can go on a particular website that tells you that sort of stuff, and I'll have that on the on the Gmail, on the little website that we're putting up, and I will find out the exact spot for it. But I know it's pretty well opposite number 48. So that's that. Look, we're already into the the radio. Yeah, it is there, but it doesn't show the exact. It says Lot 8, Newlands Avenue. Yeah. Look, we're into the credits of Erin Brockovich by now, and so I think that it might be a good idea to leave it at this point. One more question. If you go onto the SCENE website and go onto the research page, they've done it really well. I've never seen this on any other website. In the SCENE website, they do it alphabetically, and there's one section on bees, and there are about 4 or 5 different research studies on bees. And Arthur Furstenberg talks about bees too. Bee colony collapse tends to happen every time new technology is put out. So, look, we could talk all night, and maybe we will on other nights, but there will be... the point of this night really was to say, have a look yourself and do some research yourself and see what you can... And then maybe we can come together and do something. We don't quite know what, it's early days, but I just wanted to have this one night, and Erica suggested the words, pause to consider. We're not here to burn down towers and we're not coming from a protesting feeling, but more from, let's find out, let's understand it, and then work out what to do about it. Thank you so much. It's been a lovely evening.
What is 5G, and how does this technology affect me? 5G technology will use extremely high millimeter wave frequencies, Instead of having one large phone tower like we currently have for our 4G system, 5G will also have antennae or small cells set up anywhere between 100 to 500 metres on light poles, outside schools, homes and shopping centres. 5G is designed to deliver concentrated and focused electromagnetic radiation and will result in a massive increase in inescapable, involuntary exposure to wireless radiation. ARPANSA, the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, who set the safety standard limits, say that the 5G network is included within their limits. However, this limit is set at 100 times higher than most other countries worldwide. ARPANSA claim that they are an independent organisation. However, they receive $1 million annually from the wireless industry. The evidence that radio frequency radiation is harmful to living organisms forms a literature base of over 10,000 peer-reviewed studies. The peer-reviewed literature shows there are a number of serious health concerns linked with the technology 5G will use. Damage goes well beyond the human race, as there is growing evidence of harmful effects to both plants and animals. Faster internet should not come at a cost this great to the planet and all its living creatures. Let's stop this 5G rollout together. Sign and share the petition.